Let's make a white-on-white card with minimal supplies. I'm Sue from Creative Days with Sue, and I want to show you how to make this elegant card with just one sheet of white cardstock and some crafting supplies. Make sure you watch to the end where I show you two different variations of this card using the same supplies. Aside from the paper, you will need a die cut. Pick one that has a very detailed design like this one from Sizzix, an embossing folder for your background, and a greeting stamp. Along with that, grab some inks, blending brushes, and adhesive, either tape or glue. Now let's get crafting. First up, cut the paper at 4 1/4 inches. Save half for the top opening A2 card base, and cut the other half in half again at 5 1/2 inches. This will be for the front panel and the die cuts and greetings. Let's lay down some ink. I'm using Catherine Pooler's Glitz, and I'm taking my blending brush to focus the ink on the center of the front card panel. Blend it out slightly. You can make this ink spot as big or as small as you need for your die. I'm making it about 1/4 of the center of the card. Now I'm going to take my Spellbinders Mandala Blooms 3D embossing folders. Since this is a 3D folder, the embossing is at multiple levels. To ensure I get a good embossing, I am lightly misting with water the back of the card so I don't disturb the ink I just put on the front. As I line up the embossing folder, I'm making sure that the raised part will push up through the color on the front of the card. I'm also lining up the mandala so they're centered on my ink spot. Now I'll just run it through my Sizzix Big Shot to create my embossed front panel. I love this 3D embossing panel because it gives you so much dimension and details. I'll put this aside and grab my dies. I picked up Floral Contour Thinlits by Sizzix because they have a lot of details in this die. Since this card is going to be white on white, I wanted to make sure that there was lots of details in the die that I used. I'm going to cut everything in this die pack. Now I'm going to run this through twice because I want to make sure I get all the detail that this die cut has. I'll just pop out the small pieces and I'm done with the Sizzix. Look at all the details on these dies. They're absolutely beautiful. The next step is I'm going to trim down the front panel that I embossed because when I embossed it, I created a little bit of a ragged edge. By trimming it down 1/8 of an inch on all sides, I get a nice crisp edge. And this will also give me a 1/4 inch border on the front of my card. Now, while I have the paper trimmer out, I'm going to use it to score the base of my card. I'm just going to line up my card base at 5 1/2 inches and then score it right where the cutting line is with my bone folder. I'll fold the card base in half and then use the bone folder again to really set in the crease in that card. And we'll set this aside for now. Time for the front greeting. I'm going to use the scraps from the die cut paper, and I'm going to drag some glitz across it to ink one section so that it matches the ink spot on the front of my card. The greeting that I'm using today is from Catherine Pooler's Flourished butterfly set, and I'm just selecting a small space on the scraps where I know I can get a couple of inches of solid white cardstock. While I have the ink out, I'm going to dab some on my glass board so I can add a little hint of color to the individual flower dies that I have. I'm using the All-to-New Mini Dauber because I know with this I can just get the slightest bit of color exactly on the die where I want it. I'm dragging the color off of the glass board right to the tips of the flowers. I'll wipe down my dauber and then I'm going to use a little bit of salmon color. This ink color is really vivid, so I'm just going to take the slightest bit and dab it off on the glass board before I then tap it onto the tips of my flower petals. Just to give the slightest hint of color will help these flowers stand out when I use them on the inside of the card. Now take your scrap of paper to the paper cutter and cut out the greeting and the yellow mounting piece. I'm going to add the individual flowers and leaves to the inside of the card first so it has a little pop of color and interest. I'll just add a little bit of craft glue and stick them in place. Let's assemble the front of the card. With the front of the card, I'm just going to put the large die cut floral right on the center of the card where the ink spot is. I'm adhering this with foam tape so that it stands out from the embossed front panel. When you adhere the floral die cut to the center of the ink splotch on the front of the card, make sure to press down firmly because of the 3D embossing folder. You want to make sure you get good contact with the paper. Now it's time to assemble the greeting. I added a little bit of double-sided tape to my greeting and mounted on top of the small scrap of glitz-colored paper. I'm going to offset it so that there's a little bit more color on the left-hand side sticking out. To add the greeting to the front of the card, I am not only going to use double-sided tape, but I'm also going to add a bit of glue for added protection on the embossed front. I'm placing it about 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge of the card. Finally, it's time to put the front panel on the card base. Again, I'm using some foam tape so that the front panel pops out from the base of the card. Now make sure you add double-sided tape to the center of the card so that there's not a hollow spot in the middle. Also remember that this panel is 1/4 of an inch smaller than the front of the card base, so make sure to center it on the front. Now the card is done. It's a simple card with white on white, but I think that simplicity just gives it a little bit of elegance. All this beauty from just one sheet of cardstock. Now I told you I had a few other variations to show you, and here they are. If you want to enhance the embossed front panel, instead of doing an ink spot, you can actually drag your ink pad lightly across the raised pattern for a more colorful background. To keep the background simple, don't add any ink to the background panel, but add it over the die cut to bring out all the highlighted details of your die. There are lots of options from one sheet of cardstock and some ink. Which is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Also, I would appreciate it if you would click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And that's all till our next creative day.